Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm actually really honored and grateful to be able to meet with you today. So I have way too much to cover in the amount of time that we want to cover things. So I'm gonna mix things up a little bit, and I'm probably going to adjust it as we go. So a few people here know and have heard me talk about mob programming before. I know Eric and Brian. It's Brian, right? I'm really lousy with names, and now that I'm traveling around a lot, it's getting worse and worse for me. Because I try to remember everybody's name in a workshop, and then the next day it's going to be a whole nother workshop. And you've got these people, like I was just in Dublin, and while many of the names are pretty much like we would hear here, a lot of them aren't. And then I was in Helsinki the day before, or a week ago, Monday and Tuesday, and in Budapest the week before that. So it's like lots of names I've never even heard before. And it's not even pronounced Budapest. It's Budapest. So when you say Budapest, they all look at you like, can't you talk? So anyways, so as we were talking about what I might present here, we kind of phrased it this in the little blurb we put together is, in software development, we often bring together teams, but we don't do anything that's at all team-like in the way we work, in the way we interact with each other. And I've actually seen it where people are called teams, but they work in individual cubicles all day long, and they meet occasionally. So I'm going to just show a couple pictures. For example, is this teamwork? I've seen over and over again teams where when you all get together for a meeting, it's nothing like teamwork. I've actually been really troubled in a few places I've worked where you can tell that in the meeting, a lot of people won't say anything at all. They're just there to get through the meeting and hopefully not say something that will come across as them being not capable. Matter of fact, the one thing I see in these kinds of meetings a lot are somebody saying something to the effect of, no, that won't work here. We tried that 2 years ago. I don't know how often you've heard that, but that's not an infrequent thing. Another thing about teamwork, I love this picture. So my wife makes a lot of the art that I use in these things. This was something she made a long time ago. And she used to sell at little craft fairs and stuff, and people would come up and they would identify in their marriage with one or the other of these characters and think of their spouse as being the other one. So how much teamwork is going on here? And then this is like the epitome of teamwork in software development. We often see people very protective of their area. They're protective of their time. They avoid working as a team, all in the name of being a team player to get things done quickly. So I've seen it this way. Somebody comes up and says, hey, I need some help. And then the person who you've gone to help for, he's already behind in his schedule, and he's promised something by 2 o'clock today. So they'll turn back and say, yeah, I'd love to help. Can we meet at 3? And then knowing that that probably isn't going to work well because I'm going to be late on my 2 o'clock deadline, I'm going to probably end up pushing that till tomorrow at 10. So this is sort of the teamwork that I often see. So I like to think of teamwork. When I was a kid, I wasn't much in sports. I ran track in high school for a bit, but in junior high, I remember the coach in in physical ed, in PE, the coach was talking about basketball. So I don't know how it was where you went to school, but they introduced you to all the sports over a year or two at a time. You're going to play every sport there is. And so I remember the coach saying, basketball isn't about shooting baskets. It's about looking for someone else who's in a better situation than you to pass the ball to. And I really took that to heart because that meant as long as I could get the ball, I could help the team by getting the ball to somebody else who's in a better position to make a score. If I was in the best position, I better be paying a lot of attention because somebody's going to throw the ball to me, it's going to hit me right in the head if I'm not paying attention. So I really see basketball, I don't use sports analogies much, but I see basketball as being a really immediate kind of a sport. You're on this tiny little court, you're going to get knocked down or hit in the head or whatever if you're not paying attention, and the goal isn't for you to make a basket. The goal is for you to help the team make baskets, or at least get the ball away from the other team and keep them from making baskets. So this last little picture that I'm going to use, I really like. This was our original mob programming picture. I'd written my wife a note one day and said, hey, we need a slide. This is one of the few that she's actually made directly for me. I need a slide of a team mob programming, and this is what she came up with. So this is kind of cool because these people are clearly there to accomplish something together. And I kind of like that. They do look a little too angry, but that's not unlike software development. So anyway, so I'm asking this question because I usually go on to this before all those other slides, which I don't usually use those. This is a little catered to you. I usually do this thing about what do you want to learn today, but I want to change this. I'd like to see if we can break into little groups. It looks like groups of 3 or 4 would be best, where we would answer this question. Because I want to get a definition of teamwork, but I don't want you to look it up on the internet. So amongst the 3 or 4, sit at the table, come up with an idea of what is teamwork. What is teamwork? So we're going to spend only 2 or 3 minutes doing that. So you're going to have to move pretty quickly. So working towards a common goal. Let's see, we got a whiteboard marker here. Common goal, working. Common goal. Oops, common goal. Selflessly?
Yes.
Selflessly. I hope I spelled that right. Anything else? That's about it?
Sharing. Everybody sharing.
Sharing. Oh, interesting words. Alrighty. Who's got another one? Sure.
We have one of them is that it's greater than the sum of its parts. So
Greater than the sum of its parts. There's a great saying, sum of parts, from, I think it's Russell Acuff. If I can dig it out, I'll share that's similar to that. That's it?
we have leveraging strengths to achieve goals.
Leveraging strengths. Strengths to achieve goals. There's a lot of words I don't know how to spell here. Anything else?
We also had it's an economy of effort that is built on trust.
Economy of effort.
I didn't paraphrase, so it's incorrect.
Built on trust. Trust is an interesting area I've been giving a lot of thought to lately. We probably don't have time to get into it today, but that's a complex thing. Anything more?
The other ones people already kind of said.
All right, so we've already covered some. So who else? What else? Who else has?
Ours was covered. We said teamwork's a group of people working together to achieve a common goal, leveraging strength of the team members.
Did you copy off of theirs? Okay, so we had group in there, and I think the rest kind of sounded like it. Did we have group on ours? We implied it, and we kind of implied it here. So this is good. I think we're getting enough stuff there that we could come up with a definition. Did you have anything there to add?
Yeah, we said more than one person, so a group working towards common goal and not on individual things.
And not on individual things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of got a thing to, and not. I don't think we had any other that kind of gave that viewpoint on individual things. Is that what it was? On interesting. Sometimes we define something by saying what it isn't. That's kind of cool. Did you guys work on one back there, or are you just like here for the ride?
We did a little bit. Most of it's been covered, but one thing that we talked about was you have to kind of check your ego when you're working with other people.
Check your ego. That's excellent. That's excellent. You know, because it's really a tricky thing that that we spend most of our lives not working as teams. And I've seen this over and over again in software, but I've seen it in other things as well. But more so in software than a lot of the other things I've done in my life. Like when I was really young, I played music. And you do practice alone, but then you're playing with a band or with an orchestra or with a group or something. So you've got to do these things together. And if somebody who's taking the lead all the time and nobody else gets to share in that, it kind of is annoying to everybody else. So you have to be able to realize everybody's got something to contribute. So that's checking your ego. So this is an important thing. And I'm glad that we did this. I'm probably going to start including this in my workshops, because getting us, I would say, a common understanding of what teamwork is worthwhile if we can identify what that is when we're actually working this way. So I would ask a bold question, maybe not even asking for a show of hands, but do we feel that we're doing teamwork like this in our place of work, where we're kind of running things maybe? Are we getting teamwork? Are we part of the teamwork? Are we providing teamwork ourselves? I have a saying I like to use, and that's teamwork isn't something you get from a team. Teamwork is something you bring to a team. And if that's true, that sort of means we have to understand all this stuff and bring our ability to work well with the team to the team. So that's where we started. I want to share one thing first before we go any further. I really don't feel comfortable telling people how to do things, but I do feel really comfortable sharing how I've done things and how teams I've worked with have done things. I'm not here to tell you whether you should do something or not, because you always have to figure out those sorts of things for yourself in your own context, because each place is different. And now that I've been traveling around the world quite a bit and going to a lot of really large companies sometimes with thousands and thousands of software developers and other people, everywhere has problems. The smaller companies, they're a little easier to deal with than in the larger companies. The larger companies seem to have, I would say they have the impetus, if that's the right word. They have the inertia or whatever to keep going through hard times, because they're generating a lot of money with what they're doing. But dang, they're sweating it out, because there's a lot of problems trying to deal with managing the projects and the people that are involved in those projects. So I'm going to be sharing something that we did at Hunter Industries, which is up in San Marcos, California. And this happened starting in 2011. I went to work for them in April of 2011. And I stayed there almost exactly 4 years. And I'm going to share this story and some ideas about it. We have a little bit of time today, but not enough to cover everything I would like to cover. So I'm going to probably come to some slides I'll skip through as we go. We'll see how that goes. So first of all, mob programming is a type of teamwork, or it's a way of going about doing teamwork that we stumbled upon at Hunter. We didn't set out to invent a way of working. But once we started doing it and people started noticing it, we would get invited to speak at groups like this all around Southern California and then now around the world. And we knew we needed a way to describe what we're doing. So this is the way that I like to think of it. It's all the brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. And this is basically what Agile's about. Agile software development came out of a period when we were separating the people that were working on things, and they weren't working on them at the same time or in the same space. We would often have, let's just say, a group is going to be gathering requirements and making decisions about whether we want to even do a project. Then somebody's going to analyze it, and then maybe once the decision is made that we're going to do it, they're going to start gathering an analysis about the architecture and the sorts of people we'll need to hire and so on. And then eventually we have some people that are maybe designing objects and so on, and then writing code, eventually somebody testing things, and finally deploying. And that was all done in phases. There's probably enough of you here that are old enough to have seen that common. I should ask that question. I'm not going to ask how old you are, but have you seen that sort of a phased approach in software development? So has anybody not worked in a phased approach ever? Okay. So basically phased is what they call waterfall sometimes, a sort of very traditional method. The confusing thing about it for me was we're separating the really bright people who we've brought together, because what companies are usually about is bringing together a bunch of bright people to get something done, like we were saying, some kind of a common goal. And then we separate them, and they're not working together. And we not only separate them by space, sometimes they're in a different country, sometimes they're in the next state or whatever, but they're also often separated by the time they're working on something. I think this is a good group to ask this question. I've had this happen to me. where, see if this rings true with you, and I'll ask it that way when I'm done. I'm working on something, we're coding, maybe me and the team I'm working with, we're coding something, and we get a question. And we can't answer the question. It's not something you can look up in an internet search. So we want to find the person who can answer that question. But there's nobody at this time on this project that can answer it. But the person who wrote the requirements could. So we go to our boss, who goes to their boss to get the time for them, because it has to take them off another project, to come and share with us what was this requirement that we have a question for. Has anybody felt that or had that in your work? I'm going to put it this way. I had that once a few years back, not at Hunter, where we were really confused about something for about a week. We kept working on it and it just didn't gel for us. We finally found the person who had written the requirements and got permission to have them come and visit with us. They came over, we had set aside an hour to meet with them. They read the document for about 10 minutes. And what did they say when they were done reading the document?
This is not what we intended.
I don't remember.
I don't remember. Why didn't they remember? Anybody know?
They moved on to another project.
They've moved on to another project. But I think there's another element to it too. When they were writing it, they were under pressure to get their work done. So it was the pressure of getting the work done. And there's no, if you guys don't do test-driven development, you might not understand this, but there's no way to click a button and prove that the requirements are correct. With code, I can do that. At least I can prove that it does the things that I hoped it would do. It doesn't prove that it's not broken, but it proves it runs the tests that I thought it should be able to pass. I think that because when you get to the end of your deadline and writing requirements, you can take all kinds of shortcuts, and it's very hard to tell whether you got anywhere or not with it. Nobody's going to be able to scrutinize it probably any better than you. They're just going to make sure all the parts are there. So this is a tricky thing. So when we separate all those people, we have a problem. So we added this as well. This is what came out of mob programming. It's like pair programming. This wasn't, again, something we invented, and I'll share that in a few minutes. The basic thing is, if we are all sitting at the same computer, working at the same time, same space, same thing, this just all gels. And it gelled for us, and that's the story I'm sharing with you today. This is the basic idea. We have all the skills that we need. These characters represent all the skills and abilities and knowledge we need. Everybody we need. It's not a bunch of developers, not a bunch of testers, all working together at the same time. It's a very different way of thinking about work. As a matter of fact, now that we've been doing this for years, I have found a few people who talked about having done this previously. They said, oh yeah, we've done that at this company or that company. But when I talk to them, it's usually for a very short amount of time. Like they did it for an emergency, 2 days, 3 days, something like that. And then I'll ask, how did that go? Oh, it was great. We got everything done. We really came together. Why didn't you keep doing it? Well, there wasn't an emergency anymore. So basically saying a practice that we recognize works really good, we only do in case there's an emergency. And that was puzzling to me. We didn't do it that way, so that's what we're going to share here. This is what it looks like from the front. This is 6 or 7 people all working on the same thing at the same time, in the same space. It looks like we're all kind of at least partly happy, but we put a time-lapse camera in the corner, and it was taking pictures every few seconds. I think we got something like 4,000 pictures that day or something. This is the only one where we looked relatively normal, so I use it in the talks. And I actually got up because I was sitting over here, and for a while I got up and stood behind everyone. So it kind of looks like I'm Captain Kirk or something there. Maybe more like Picard, I suppose. But it makes me feel heroic. So there we go. This is from the back. So I want to point out 2 things. There's one computer. It's right underneath that book. That's what everybody's working through. These 2 keyboards are what we're coding at to get our code into the keyboard. There are other computers around. There's one there, and you can see back in this picture, there's a computer back here, and there's actually 2 over here. There's a table with a computer, and there's another workstation. So the team members can use these other computers at any time they want. It's not that we're all working focused completely on the 2 screens that are shown here, but that's basically where our focus is. So if, for example, I used to do a lot of database stuff. If at this moment we're coming up to something that's going to need a complex query, I might be thinking about that query as the team's working forward on the work that they're doing. So I might be contributing a little bit as we go, but as soon as they need the query, I'm ready to contribute that part. By this time, I don't think I was doing any coding with the team, but that's the basic idea. A couple other things I'm going to point out. We sit pretty far from each other. Now, when I've done pair programming, you often sit very close to each other, and that can become sort of uncomfortable through the day because you're not paying attention to your posture and things like that. A couple other things I'll point out. We had an ergonomic and a regular old keyboard. We also tried about 5 different keyboards. The reason I'm pointing that out is that we wanted to have keyboards that were comfortable for everybody on the team. We wanted to have everybody with their own chair so that they didn't have to readjust the chairs all the time. That lent to comfort. We also spent a lot of time figuring out what was the right height for the screens. A screen at this height would kind of get on you throughout the day. If you worked with a screen this high and you're sitting relatively close, you're always kind of looking up. We noticed if you're working in a conference room with a conference table, then you've always got your head turned towards the screen. That's not good. So we paid a lot of attention over time. By this time, we'd been doing it about a year. And we were paying a lot of attention to how do we feel throughout the day? Are we getting headaches? Are we getting a sore back? Are we getting fatigued and things like that? So that just gives us an environment, a physical environment that worked well for us. This is just to show that this can be done remotely. I've worked in the last 2 years quite a bit remotely with teams. This company's Corgi Bytes. They're in Richmond, Virginia. I know Andrea, who's the CEO of the company, and Wendy work in different cities. I know she's in Richmond and Wendy's in New York. I'm not sure where the other 2 fellows there are working, but they work 3 hours a week, 3 times a week. So they'll get together for 3 hours 3 times a week. So I'm going to show you, this is Hunter. Probably, everybody here probably knows of Hunter. If you don't, you probably have Hunter sprinklers either in your home or where you work, because they're all over Southern California and all over the world. I've found them in almost everywhere I've gone. The reason I show this is because of their little byline there, built on innovation. When I went to work for them, their byline was actually the irrigation innovators, but as they were adding lighting to their product line, they wanted to add built on innovation. So it kind of changed the theme. But when they hired me, I pointed out to them that they have innovation in their byline there, which means I'm expecting to be able to do innovation. I've actually been to some companies where they have a vice president of innovation or a director of innovation. And I'm a little puzzled by that because I don't think you can really manage innovation. I think what you need to do is liberate people to be able to do innovation. So this was something that was important to me. I pointed it out to them and I told them I'm expecting to be able to innovate. In fact, I don't always tell groups this. I didn't put it in the slides. But before I would go to work for them, I insisted they agreed to give me a year of working with their team before we would decide whether it was successful or not. No interference for a year. And once they agreed to that, then I agreed to go to work for them. You cannot judge these things based on what you already know, and that's what we're sort of talking about today. This is a view of them now at Hunter Industries. There was the 1 team we started with, and now in this area is 6 teams. There's actually 9 teams in this part of the company that are working this way. They're mostly a manufacturer. The chunk of folks that do software development is a very small percentage of the number of people. They've got a couple big factories down in Tijuana where they do manufacturing, plus a group of things up in San Marcos. We'll see a little bit more of this in a minute. So I'm going to go through some pictures real quick just to show you teams all over the world doing this. This is another shot at San Marcos. At Hunter, you can see there's actually 4 teams here. It's hard to tell, but there's the top of somebody's head right there and somebody else there. They're standing on the other side of those 3 screens behind. So there's 4 people on a team there. There's actually 5 people on this team, and there's another team over there. So this is a group in Alaska, a group in France, a group in the UK, I think, a group in Hungary, which I was just there. I didn't find these folks, but I would have liked to have met them. I was at a conference. GDS in London. I share this because look how happy they are. That was a joke, folks. I did not take this picture, and I would have said, smile. Another at GDS. GDS is Government Digital Services. They're really quite known for their agile approach to doing government software. They really revitalized. I've been to their offices 3 or 4 times, revitalized their whole software development environment there. And this is pretty cool. You can actually see a couple keyboards there, another one over here. There's all kinds of stuff on this table, but everybody's sitting on the one side of the table and the screen's on the other. So I'm just pointing out, and they do have each they look like good full-day chairs. Could you imagine working in chairs like this all day? You want to pay attention to comfort. These are good for, you know, meetings and stuff, but they're not good for working all day. This is Zipcar in Boston. I actually, I visited them a couple times. I'm not sure that I took this photo. This is Unruly in London. They have 6 teams. In Zipcar, there's 5 or 6 teams, and in Unruly in London, there's 6 teams. It's a group in South Africa. This guy actually now lives down in New Zealand. A group in London. A group in Japan. This is fascinating to me. Several of these people I've met over the years at different conferences, and they've been slowly introducing it over there. Another group in South Africa. I want to point out, this is quite interesting. Notice how they're facing the other direction? All the other teams are facing this way, and they're facing that way. Think about that. It's an interesting thing. I haven't really done any testing to prove why that might be, but there we go. A group in Florida. I want to point out the chairs here. They look like this would be comfortable, but this wouldn't be comfortable to sit and work like this all day. I did work with a team at a place called Tagged in San Francisco, and they had one team of very young people in a room about this size but with higher ceilings, and they actually mounted their monitors on the ceiling, and they sat in beanbag chairs on the, and they just kind of laid back all day. It was pretty interesting. This is a nice setup, group in Greece. Now I want to show a couple things here. There are 3 keyboards here, so actually it looks like 4. So they can have 4 people easily working here without having to move around much. We always stuck with just a few keyboards because we like to get the movement in. Across the way, they put their monitor on a table. So the reason I like to show this is, as you saw in some of the others as well, it's really straightforward. You don't need a special room for it. It is really important to get things like the height of the monitor and the distance of it from where you're working, so everybody could see it without eye strain. Important stuff, and neck and back pain. This is a group who needs to get bigger monitors, and I like to point this out. You can even do this with these kind of tiny monitors, but that would be uncomfortable. I used to have a saying, you're not really on a team if you can't smell your teammates, but this overemphasizes that rule. So I would be cautious to sit this way for very long. And who knows, maybe they've gotten used to each other. This is another team that's done a pretty good job with the large monitors, I think. You know where this is. They're not really programming, but what they're doing is they're all working on the same thing at the same time. This is the same idea. We're working on a mission, and that mission kind of means, what was that? Not on an individual thing. Well, each of these people are contributing their expertise. I think this one here says payload deployment retrieval something. I can't make out any of those others. Probably if I got a higher definition picture I could. Each grouping here has their own specialty, and they're all contributing to the same mission, and they're all paying attention to the mission level stuff here, and they're paying attention to the details they need to pay attention to there. This is a good example of teamwork. I've never visited this. I'd like to go see this in actual use. This is a group that I'm just showing this because this was just 4 days ago in Dublin. This is a team I did a workshop with doing mob programming at this conference, ALI. So I like to share something recently I've done. So I want to make a point though. These people everywhere around the world are doing this because they're just as crazy as I am. I want to prove that I'm not the only crazy person. And I really feel that if what we were doing was too far out, nobody would have picked up on it, but it's far enough out there that people who are looking for improving things notice it. And that's why this has grown. We didn't think this would be an interesting thing. Once we started doing it, it was just an accident for us to start doing it, but somebody who came in to give us some training, Llewellyn Falco, he noticed it's doing it, and we had been using it as a training mechanism, him and I, on some things. And he started sharing it with other people. These people are working as a real team all day long. And it was very effective for us, so I want to share a little bit about that. But I want to show a video. Some of you have seen this. We did this as a time-lapse video approximately 4 or 5 years ago, because this must have been 2012. And I'll only share about a half of it. It's a 3-minute video that shows us working for a full day. We spend an hour every morning studying together. We actually study together every morning plus an extra 3 hours every Friday. So it's a total of 8 hours a week we're studying together. We don't need to do stand-ups because we're always aligned. We don't need to ask each other, what did you do yesterday? Because we all did it together. We actually have almost no meetings whatsoever. You saw the dual projectors, now we use the monitors. You see the single computer. This is kind of the important part. How can you work this way? We'll talk a little bit about it now, we'll cover a little bit more. This concept of the driver is a person at the keyboard. Everybody else is a navigator. The product owner is essentially part of the team. They're the one who probably spends less time with the team than all the rest of the people. But I would really wish, well, that's a tip, don't let anyone know that. I would really wish to have the product owner there the whole time. It makes things so much better. We had just finished some work for them, pushed it to production, we're on to the next story for them. What used to take us 3 or 4 weeks to get a story through was now taking us an hour or 2, because everybody's focused on the same thing at the same time. You can go off and do solo work anytime you want. There's nothing keeping you from doing whatever helps you get through the day. If you feel there's something you want to work on alone, you go work on it alone. There's nothing required. This is all totally voluntary. So there's only one last thing I want to show, should come up in a moment here, and that's that we take lunch at the same time. Now this was sort of almost totally by accident. We started off, everybody just coming in like programmers do at whatever time they like their schedule to be. And then as we really started working well together, we started, and you can see all the things I'm interested in. We started, we could look at some of those things, they're more interesting than this. We started noticing that we really liked being together and working together and really enjoying that, and we sort of self-aligned to come in at the same time, take lunch at the same time, and leave at the same time. One of the rules when I got hired there that I made was nobody's ever going to work overtime. In the 4 years I was there, we never worked overtime. There was one day we worked a little bit late because there was something we were having a lot of fun with. And nowadays they have a board game nights and stuff, but nobody ever works late. All the same stuff. They're still studying an hour every morning. They meet as teams. No need for stand-ups, no need for meetings. I mean, they work as teams. The teams are always aligned, doing actual work. You can watch the teams throughout the day. People get up and take a break whenever they need to. I put these sparkles in so you can kind of wakes you up, you know. And so this is kind of charming. But there's 6 teams there now. There are now 9 teams. We have continuous integration, continuous deployment area. Each team's responsible for pushing their stuff to production. And some of them are doing it, 5 or 6 times a day, some of it less frequently. We now have an office where the product owners come and be with us, so we don't have to go find them in the company when we have a question. They're always there ready to answer the question. That's a critical thing we'll talk about in just a little bit. This is something we're pointing out about being happy programmers. At first, we weren't really paying attention to how much we were enjoying it. And then as people came, they would almost always say, boy, you really seem to be enjoying working here. And we realized we really did. It just was one of those things that coming in the morning was fantastic. We were looking forward to working together, looking forward to getting home on time to spend time with our family. We have the same thing as before. Lunch, everybody sort of self-aligns on. We like to point out that we use hand sanitizer because people ask about that. You do need to, you really need to look out for your health, but you'll see how far apart everybody's sitting. When you sneeze, you're not impacting too many other people. We'll talk more about the details of this in a moment. I think we covered enough there. Oh, I would like to point out, as a matter of fact, I'll stop it here, if I can get over there quick enough. Over here is, well, Dexter's right now is talking to Chris. Chris is the guy that replaced me when I left the company. Chris is about 30 years old. When I hired him, I guess he was about 25. It is one manager for about 40 people there, 40 developers. Now, you may have the same thing in your company with hardly any managers for the number of developers, but I think that this is really a testament to how well this works. Chris is particularly brilliant, but I don't think that has anything to do with the necessity for the number of managers. I'll show you real quick. So I'm just going to search on mob programming in Twitter, And a lot of it you'll see will have my picture in it, but here is, so I was just in Dublin. Here's some folks. This was in Detroit at some kind of a conference. Someone asking for good experience with projectors. I could give him some tips. Here's a group somewhere at Skyscanner. I don't even know what Skyscanner is. World's travel search engine. Well, good luck with that. And then here's someone with their mob programming with their kid, kind of a fun thing. Luell and Falco talking about it at Agile Main Days. There was the conference I was just at. Mob programming in 1995. I'm not sure what that's from, but that'd be interesting to find out. That's Budapest. So the reason I'm showing you this, here's a group, I don't know where these folks are. They're doing Elixir at Sky UK. So I actually did a workshop at Sky UK. Oh, I probably should, let me retweet that. What the heck? There we go. So this is my way to sneak in some tweeting. Okay, people at Crazy Agile Thing learning about mob programming in Leeds. So Louise Elliott's a big player in the Agile stuff there. So pretty cool. The reason I'm showing you this is like 5 years ago, nobody would have tweeted about mob programming, and now we see it all over the place. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so let's get back to our talk. I'm not trying to promote mob programming. I want to make that really clear here. I'm sharing these ideas because people have been asking us to share these ideas, and then it started becoming clear to me that maybe this is an important thing. And it's my contribution right now to make sure that at least enough people get a chance to try this, to see if it's worth it for them to try. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown on the driver navigator idea. In fact, yeah. The concept of the driver, you could think of it when you're in your car and you're driving, and nowadays they don't let you use your handheld device to navigate. You can turn it on where it's talking to you, but if you have someone sitting there with you, they can be navigating you. And they don't navigate you by going, drive 50 feet, then keep driving another 50 feet, then now drive another 50 feet. They're going to say, in about 2.5 miles, we're going to make a right turn. And then as they get closer, they're going to say, oh, in about 3 blocks, we're going to make a right turn. You can slow down here, we're making a right turn at the next street. That was the right turn that I just said to turn right, and you passed it. But that's how we navigate, right? We're going to tell you the long range, and you can just pass cars, whatever, till we get close. Then we warn you, you're going to turn right here. So it's the basic same idea. The navigators are going to instruct the driver, and everybody in this team is a navigator. And you would think that would be awful. It's like 3 people in the car all telling you which way to turn. But it's not really the way it works. What's basically happening is we've separated the programming context from the thinking about the problem context. And in our particular way of doing it, we switch out the person at the driver at the time we took this, it was 15 minutes, but now it's like every 6 or 7 minutes. That person's job is to hear what the team wants to do, the direction they're going in, and code that direction in. Everybody else is talking about where we're going and what we're going to do next in real time. Instead of these people thinking at different times and working on different things at the same time, they're working on the one thing at the same time. So I've seen this on teams where you put up a sprint board, you have maybe 5 or 6 or 10 stories you're going to get done this sprint, so to speak. You've broken it into tasks, and the database person goes, oh yeah, I can do that task, I can do that task, I can do that task. And off they go to work on their stuff. This is called silos, right? That the database person's working in a silo. They don't only have a silo of their expertise, they have a silo that's ignorance of what everybody else is doing. Then there's going to come a time where we got to merge all those things we were working on. So we take the things we're going to work on, we work on them in silo, and when we come back together, I'm not just talking about merging code. I'm talking about merging ideas. Because we're going to divert from each other as we think about how things should be. Now we can have meetings throughout the day. There's reasons not to mess with that. But we'll talk about that in a bit. For this to work, this was the kind of the rule. Llewellyn had taught me this about 10 years ago that I've been following ever since, and it basically goes like this. This is the key for an idea to go from somebody's head into the computer. It has to go through someone else's hands. Now this is a very tricky thing because, well, first of all, I can ask you as a group, what would this require to be able to do this? Communication.
Trust.
Trust.
Yeah.
What else? Respect. So this is just the beginning of it. So communication happens when, well, I'll put it this way, I'll ask it as a question. What has to happen for us to hear someone else's idea? We have to be able to listen, and we have to be quiet. They have to feel comfortable telling you or sharing those things with you, and not only feel comfortable, able to do it. I've seen this a lot when I'm training teams, is we spend most of our time practicing not doing that. We're keeping the ideas in our heads. I've even heard people say, well, how do you ever get this, anything done if you're going to be arguing about stuff all the time? And well, you mean you're just going to work separately on this stuff and then argue later? How are you going to work out your differences? So this is sort of part of it. This requires, yes?
So if Brian gives an idea, but I'm the driver,
Yes.
is it my job as the driver to put in exactly what he said without editing?
Yes.
Or, okay, so I'm not asking questions along the way or questioning.
So I'll cover that in the next slide, okay? This is a critical part of it. It's just as if, you know, you've got somebody in the car navigating you, and they say, you got to turn at the next street. No, this one coming up, this one here, and you turn left instead of right. Well, why did you do that? Oh, I think this is a better way. Well, why do we have the navigator? So let's talk about that. So the basic idea is this. We have a keyboard that we put stuff into the computer. Why do we use it? Does anybody here use a keyboard in your daily work? Okay. So why do you use a keyboard?
Because the dictation function doesn't work well enough.
Well, actually, there are people who do use the dictation really well to do programming, probably a lot faster than we can type. But what else?
Used to it? Because it's understood by everybody.
Used to it, understood by everybody. Well, if I were to ask you about why do you eat food, would you say because we're used to it? Why do we eat food? I mean, it gives us the energy that we're going to live on. Why do we breathe? Why do we use keyboards? To enter. Why do we use keyboards to enter stuff into the computer?
Because it's in our head, and it's the fastest way to get it from our head.
It's the fastest way. Okay. So that's close enough. I'm going to say it's the only way we've figured out so far to do this effectively. And I think it's kind of a crummy way. The keyboard's a dumb input device. How about if I was up here talking to you and I said driver/navigator. You would all go, well, I'm not going to go listen to that guy anymore. Because we don't talk to people as if they're keyboards. So this is a critical thing. We use the keyboard because it's what we've got, and nobody's come up with a better way, and I think that this is a better way. We now have a driver which could be considered as a smart input device. Just like you can be in a car getting transported and you don't know how to drive at all, and you have a driver, you can use the car. You just tell them where you want to go. So this is the same basic idea. Now this is how programmers look nowadays. I can't quite get my hair to do that anymore. But this, let's pretend, is a keyboard operator, which is sort of a programmer. Everybody else is a navigator. The job of the person at the keyboard is to hear the idea that we're now currently expressing as a team and getting it into the computer. And it could be like this. The product owner, whichever one this is, might say, we're going to do this dunning system where we'll send a warning to somebody if they haven't been making their payments on time. It's going to be based on if they made a late payment in the last 6 months, we want to scrutinize their past year of payment records. So that's what we're going to work on, and then we're going to send them a warning based on some rules that we follow. That's enough for a team to start working on it. The product owner or the person developing the requirements might need to do a lot of work on that if they're going to write a document to share how that works. But in this case, all they got to do is say that's what we're going to do. Somebody on the team can navigate that at a code level or closer to the code level, might say, well, yeah, let's make a new class. That class will be our credit warnings, email system, or whatever we want to call it. We're going to start working on it. And we say, well, let's see. The first thing, let's write a test. If we got a customer, can we get a list of their late payments in the last 6 months if they've had a late payment? And if they have, then we're going to put them into this system, and we're going to go ahead and verify that they meet all the rules to get a warning or not. And we can start now coding that. The person that's at the keyboard, we switch out every few minutes, and we would use a timer to do that. You don't need to do that. That's how we've done it. We use a timer. This particular one is a software. It just blanks out the screen. When the timer goes off, it blanks out the screen, asks the next person to sit down. So in this case, the person sits down, and they start keying that in. If they understand the code at a high enough level that they can start coding that, they do. If they can't, if it's a more junior person, we might have to say, open up this project, create a new file, go to the right there, right click, select new file, and we can give them directions at almost a code level, but we can also do it at a very high level. So we're no longer having to code by clicking on letters or shortcuts. We can code by speaking out loud. And it works really, really well, especially once you get good at it. And then out throughout the rest of the day, we just rotate. That person at the keyboard rotates frequently. I like a shorter rotation. Teams are using 7 to 10 minutes there right now in Hunter. The rotation is to keep any one person from getting stuck at the keyboard. So whoever wants to take the keyboard will rotate through and take the keyboard. In this particular case, we just keep the rotation the same. But when we come back from lunch, we can randomize it. It doesn't really matter. The order isn't important.
How much debate, discussion, design goes on before you actually start navigating someone to actually input code into the...
Usually not a lot, because what will normally happen is the team, because the team's all together, we already know the general direction. If we do find there are two people with conflicting ideas, then we'll try them both. So the key is we're not going to discuss which idea is better for very long. I have seen programmers discuss an idea they could prove in 10 minutes, discuss it for an hour. They will actually discuss it for an hour until they finally decide which one is better, and then what happens when they start doing the one that was better. Anybody want to say?
They realized it was the other way.
Yeah, and then they do the other one, and what do they find out? That wasn't so good either. We need to get to the third and the fourth try. And if we're always arguing about the first try, getting to the third and fourth try can take a long time. And often we don't even get to those better solutions because we're not paying attention. So this is one of the things about working well together that we needed to learn, is to get beyond having the long discussions. So if you were to navigate and you would say, well, new up a customer, and somebody says, well, we already have a customer factory thing. Well, there's a conflicting idea. And so we'd say, oh, you already have a customer factory, then let's just use that. And then we use that because maybe we have 10 different kinds of customers we work with. So.
And then how much of it is make it work and then go back and make it pretty, make it fast?
Yeah, it's always make it work. Do the simplest thing you possibly can to get it working, because it's in the doing of the work that we discover the work that we need to do. Until we have something working, most of the solutions in software, we don't even know what the problem is till we start having some solutions. Then we go, that didn't quite do it. It's like one of those things where you don't really know what you want until you see it, and that's sort of how we go about it. So this is having an ambition to action rather than having the idea that we're going to discuss and figure everything out up front and do it. So all of our architectures will emerge. We'll start with an idea of what we want, but it's going to emerge as we do it. Why would we work this way? I'll first ask that question. Give me 5 or 6 of you, shout out a reason. Why would we work this way?
Better code faster.
Better code faster.
More eyes.
Better?
More eyes.
More eyes. So we have a lot more scrutiny of both the code and our designs and our ideas.
Faster feedback loops on touch points.
Very rapid feedback loops. As soon as, matter of fact, it used to be if one person on the team had a question about something, to find somebody else to look at it, that itself was a wait. Right now it's instantaneous. It really comes down to this. As a matter of fact, let me answer this for you. We would work this way because the team decided to work this way. This flips the question over. So many places I've worked 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't even pair program. You were not allowed to pair program. What's the reason they usually give for that?
Wastes time.
Waste time. Why should I have 2 people doing the work of 1 person? That shows a complete misunderstanding. I hope none of you have ever said that. And if you have, please rethink that. That's like saying, I mean, it's essentially saying the same thing as, why should I pay for a whole band? I can just get a bass player. They're great. You know, and then you come to the wedding and the guy's just sitting there playing the bass. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, nice. This is about flow. This is what this is about. This was so important. This next little set of slides is what we'll close on. Although I've got a lot more I can share with you. The things that you're asking about are all about flow. That's why I wrote it down twice here. Okay, to me this is so important. What we're usually focused on is optimizing individuals, and that does not necessarily give us any benefit. Matter of fact, there's so much management in typical software development, we're probably spending most of our time coordinating and managing people, not as managers, the individuals themselves. I'm going to share a couple ideas about it. You've used value stream maps. Does anybody here use a value stream map in what you do? I'm going to show one example of it. Here, we're going to just call whatever's green is good things getting done, value-adding work, red being not value-adding work. Okay, if we go across through a day and we had that much waste, we'd be losing about half our day. That is not uncommon in software development. I think it's a lot more. The green here is getting work done. The wastes we'll see are things like waiting, merging our code. Mob programming and pair programming are about the continuous integration of ideas. It's a really cool thing. Fixing mistakes that didn't need to happen. Arguing, discussing rather than doing. There's lots of other kinds of wastes. When we optimize for the flow, we're not paying attention to the individual. We want to get work done from beginning to end without any interruptions. That's what flow is. So if we start on something and we finish it in one working session, we could have lunch in between and stuff. We are attaining flow. But if we're constantly being interrupted like we do when we all work separately on stuff, having to go to each other to ask questions and coordinate our things, we are not getting flow. That's why we see so little get done in most software development. Somebody asked about faster. Well, it's not so much about faster, it's about removing the waste. You know? Here's the thing. We're going to optimize for the flow rather than the output of the individual. And another thing is, we're not going to go towards getting the most work out of each individual. If we try to get the most work out of each person, then we're going to lose most of the effectiveness of this team. What we want to do is to get the best of everything into everything we do. We want to get the best of everyone, of each of us, into everything we do. When we do that, we get very high quality. In the 3.5 years I was at Hunter, after we started working this way, we had 3 bugs get into production. 3 bugs reported from production in something like 40 projects we worked on. Prior to that, there were tons of bugs all the time, so quality was much higher. The technical debt was almost completely eliminated because there was 5 or 6 people scrutinizing everything we did in real time. When you do code reviews at the end of a module being written, somebody has to go back and work it. You know, you got to change these things to get rid of the technical debt. Oh, well, we make the decision to wait till next time or sometime in the future. Here, the team's doing it in real time. We want to make it as easy to get work done tomorrow as it was today. I've seen projects after 2 or 3 weeks start to slow down, and definitely after 2 or 3 months. What happens after 6 months? What's one of the most common things you hear in a project that's dragging along, slogging through the mud after 6 months? You're all CTOs, you know. What do they say? Can it? Let's start over. Because this thing's a mess now, we have to start over. With what we've learned, let's start over. We can work in ways that we don't get that. So I think we've covered enough today. This was quite a bit to cover. I want to just share, I'm going to show one last screen, and then we'll be done. This was just a beginning. I want to share one thing. This was one of the things we were focusing on when we first started. When I came on at Hunter, I had 5 or 6 things, and one was no interference for a year, but another was instead of looking for problems to fix, we're going to look for things that are going well and figure out how to turn those up. This comes from Kent Beck, who is one of the extreme programming fathers, so to speak, and he basically said he had all these practices, he knew that they were good, and he was wondering what it would be like if I just turned them all up to 10. And that's the idea of turning up the good. And I really take that to heart. When we have what's the next problem we need to fix attitude, we get in the habit of doing that, and after a while, that's all we do. We're always looking for the next problem to solve, instead of looking for, well, look at this is going good. What can we do to turn that up? And with mob programming, what happened for us was that almost instantly, once we started working together as a team, everybody realized we were learning a lot. It was a lot of fun. We were getting the rapid feedback. We were getting all these advantages, and we wanted to keep doing it. At the end of that very first session, we had a 2-hour session. We didn't even know we were going to work this way until we started doing it, accidentally. We all decided let's continue doing it, and the rest of the day we did. At the end of the day, we decided to do it the next day. At the end of that day, we decided to try it for a week. Just work together full-time in a room together. And after the week of doing that, we decided we needed a permanent spot. We found a permanent spot in the company, and that was now 6 years ago almost. So we've been working this way every day for 6 years. So I think that's probably covered enough stuff for one session. So.